Welcome, stranger. It's been a few weeks. Here in Texas, it's been 110 every day this week. I don't know if global warming is is real or not, but it feels like it. Customer recently sent me a Nikon FM. He said he was seeing black streaks in the viewfinder. Found the problem, fixed it. Camera is in a disassembled state. And now's a good time to take you on a tour through the Nikon FM. So let's get started. Start with the top cover like we always do. This top cover's in, I would call it mint condition, which is really unusual for a camera of this age, 40 plus years probably. I don't know what year they started making the FM. Late 70s, early 80s. But the edge here has no dings at all. Same way on this side. No dings at all. Excellent. Front's not bent. I get so many cameras that that have dents on them and dings that it's really a pleasure to see a camera that's clean like this. As you can see, FM. I had to take this collar off. There was a lot of grunge under it. There's a clip on the bottom here you have to remove, and it comes right off. I noticed there when I was checking it out that there was marks and a little bit of rust in here on this ring. I don't know how that happened. Customer or maybe a repairman removed it, and I just don't know exactly how it could get scratched up in there. The rest of the top cover looks so good and clean. It is a mystery to me. But the collar's brass and the coating's coming off. I don't know why. The thing that I expect on cameras is here's the flash shoe. Quite often they're dropped and they're bent on top. This one's not. And the viewfinder here, sometimes they drop them and they bend them in just slightly. And there'll be a dimple or a ring around it where you can see that it got bent in. There's nothing I can do about that. These viewfinders are stamped in and are crimped in, I guess would be the better word for it. And there's no way you can repair them once they're bent in. I've tried, but once you take them out, you can't put them back. Oh, I suppose you could use some epoxy if you wanted to and put them back in, but there's no way to get the surface of this camera here flat again. I've tried using hammers and blocks, but it never looks good. The flash only has one contact, which is unusual. A wire goes underneath this tape here and comes to it. The FE that I worked on a few weeks back had 4 contacts. This one has 1. Very simple camera, the FM. I kind of like that about it. The less it's on a camera, the less things there is to go wrong with it. This camera will last longer than the FE because it's less complicated and there's less things on it to go wrong. Let's look at the bottom cover. I know customers complain. I say customers, viewers complain. But the history's in the bottom cover. I've explained this before. This one has not been scratched, but I do see rub marks across it. Where it was set on a counter or different things. And you can see that it's been used. There are some cameras, there's no rub marks on them, no scratches, nothing. I would call mint. This one's not mint. I guess this would be what, Good Plus? I don't know the system they have on cameras. Excellent. Yeah, Excellent Plus. And the inside's clean, no acid, no rust. So the camera basically is in very good condition. The only thing I can't explain on it is that collar on the shutter release. So what are we going to look at next? Well, we're going to look at the film door. And I can already hear the groaning as everybody says, the film door is boring. Show me the good stuff. I want to see the mirror cage, the body. Nope, we're going to look at the film door. And as you can see on this film door, there's a strange pattern imprinted on it. And you think, well, what's that? Well, that is, whoops, fell off there. That is the film that somebody left in the camera. They stored it, they left the film in it, and it was in a hot place. And the cellulose, if that's the correct word, of the film reacted with the paint in the camera under the heat. They shouldn't have left the film on the camera to begin with, and the camera shouldn't have been in a place, stored in a place where it got hot. I don't know if humidity had anything to do with it or not, but I know the heat does. Heat is normally what damages cameras. People don't store them properly. That is, they put them in a place where it gets hot. Okay, I put in this pressure plate here, which is used. There are no new ones. And it was the best one I had. I saw a little wear on this pressure plate along here. It looks bad, but like I said, it was the best one I had at the time. And this right here just needs to be cleaned. That's nothing there. Something that got on the camera while I was working on it. Here is the foam I replaced at the hinge. And as you can see, there's some cotton fibers on it. What I wanted to show you is that when you're working on cameras with Q-tips and cotton balls, quite often the cotton will get caught into the foam. Here's some here. But usually there's too many cotton fibers to use your tweezers. So what you do is, and I will turn off my camera. What you do is get some tape. I use masking tape all the time when I'm working on cameras for different things. And people do this with their clothing. Just do this on the foam, and that should lift off the cotton fibers. There we go. You can see they're all gone. And that's how you get cotton fibers out of foam when you're working on cameras. The this stud here, which you can see better at that angle, goes into the activates the camera's counter. All cameras have a stud here. And it's a good place for light to get in and fog your film, so you always put foam behind it here. As you can see, there's no stud on this side. I put foam in there anyway, just as a precaution. This is 1 millimeter, 2 layers. You have to really protect the on the right-hand side of the camera, because the film is on a spool and it's exposed. And if any light gets into the camera compartment, it'll fog your film. So I always put extra foam on the right-hand side where the hinge is at. And beside, hinges sometimes get worn and they get play, and light can get in. So it's always a good idea to make sure you put plenty of foam on the right-hand side. This right here is a little latch that lets you remove the door. Nikon has data backs, and so some people want to switch them out. A lot of cameras don't have this. If they install a data back, it's permanent. But Nikon lets you switch them out by making their doors removable, which adds more cost to making the camera. But Nikons. That's why they cost more. Let's see here. I'm having a little trouble with focus today. This film door, you can see wear at the corners here and here and here and here. This film door is not as in good a shape as the top cover, bottom cover. I don't know why. Maybe the customer added a different film door. Maybe that was damaged. Or maybe he just shot a lot of film through the camera and this door was open and closed many times. This film door is, it's passable, but I would give it a rating of good, not excellent. Okay, that's it. That's enough about film doors and pressure plates. What I wanted to show you next was the simplicity of the exposure system on the FA. Go with this right here. Maybe right here would be better. I installed the exposure meter circuit board purposely without attaching it so we could have a look at it here. This is a circuit board here. Green, very small, round like so. And the circuit board inserts a small LED holder right here. 3 LEDs. Hand them a block here, shaking. 3 LEDs going to the viewfinder. And that's what you see when you look through the camera. And that's how you set your exposure. And then the circuit board has to be attached to the eyepiece because the photocells are here and here. So now I'm going to remove it. Like I said, I didn't attach it because I wanted to show you how it fits on there. Okay, now take that off. Move the mirror cage aside. Okay, now there's the whole business. There's your circuit board. And if you look down here, you'll see the LEDs that go into the viewfinder. I think the top one's a plus. I'm having trouble seeing it. The bottom's a negative, and the dead center circle, when that LED lights up, your exposure is correct. And you might say, well, how do you do that? Well, as you move your f-stops on your lens back and forth, the LED might go to the top or the bottom, counting whether you're under or overexposed. Same way with your speed control. As you change your speeds, you'll either be overexposed or underexposed. When you get the f-stops and the speeds balanced, the center circle here will have an LED which lights up, and then you know your exposure is correct. And it's, like I said, extremely simple system, and it's genius. It's so compared to a lot of cameras that I've seen. Like if you look through the video I've got on the FE, this is so simple. I like it. See there are your photocells. It's not actually the photocell, that's the lens that the light goes through. Photocells are actually up here. There's a photocell. There's a photocell. The light comes through here and is bounced up to the photocell here. And of course this is your eyepiece. Over here you've got pots to set the exposure, adjust it if it needs it. I forget, it's only one. I think this one right here is that. These two I never adjust. You never want to adjust factory pots just to be adjusting them. When they're set at the factory, they're set perfect, and they should never be moved. Only move a pot when you have to. Like if you have a camera that's underexposing or overexposing a stop, you might have to adjust it here. But other than that, you want to leave it alone. Anyway, that's it. That's the exposure system. Very interesting little system. Really do like it. Okay, that's in that. Let's move on. Okay, next I guess we'll be looking at the mirror cage. What do we want here? There's our mirror cage. We're going to have to cover a lot of territory in this mirror cage because there's a lot of things to talk about. Here we are. Looks like other mirror cages, but it's vastly different. The FM is a very simple camera, and that's what I like about it. Manual, controlled, f-stops, speeds, and very simple. Not much in the way of electronics. The exposure circuit board I showed you earlier was about the extent of the electronics in this camera, which means there's less to fail. Okay, let's start off with this over here, let's say. And I've got to find it first. This brass cylinder and this plunger right here are controlled to the are connected to the mirror. The mirror, when it flips up or down, does so with a lot of force, and that dampener keeps it from bouncing. You don't want it to bounce at the top or bounce at the bottom. If a mirror really bounces hard, it'll even cut off part of the picture. And if it even I'll get it here in a second, folks, hold on. It can blur your picture if you're shooting at a low speed, like a 30th of a second. If the mirror goes up and hits real hard, it can blur your picture. And if it bounces up and then down, it will cut off part of your picture at one side. Since the picture's then upside down, it won't be at the top, it'll be at the bottom. It'll be a black bar. So you don't want your mirror bouncing at the top or at the bottom. The different companies have different ways of controlling it. This is Nikon's way. It's a good way, works fine. Over here we have all the gears and levers, which always seems ridiculous that it takes this much, but this controls the mirror, charges it so it can go up or, and drop it. Need to charge it, I guess, before we have a look here. Push that forward, pull that over like so. Now it's charged. And something to look through it here. Let's see here. That'll work. Okay, right over here, when you press the plunger, it presses against this, and the mirror should flip up. There it is. Not too violent. Like I said, the plunger helps slow it down toward the end. And then to release it, after the exposure is made, the body presses down on this right here and releases the mirror. And I don't know if I can. It takes a lot of pressure to push that down. No, I can't. I don't know why they made it that way, but it really takes a lot of pressure to release that mirror. There we go. And it's down. Here in the back, and I'm going to see if I can catch the light on this. Foam is hard to see because it's black. The only thing you can do is catch the highlights, so it can be seen in a photograph or a video. Right here. On the FE2, which I did an earlier video on, there was a piece of plastic over here. Most companies just put a piece of plastic over here to keep the light out. On this particular model, they chose to use foam. The reason you don't want light getting through to your shutter is because a lens can actually focus light, sunlight, like a magnifying glass. And I've seen many shutters that have had holes burned through them because the customer was on the beach or someplace and he laid the camera on its back and the sun came down through the lens, focused on the shutter and burned a hole in it. And this is to, I will say, help prevent. It may not completely prevent, but you don't want your lens focusing light on the shutter in one spot. It will burn a hole in it. I've seen it many times, and that's what that's for. Moving around to the front. Let's see, what should we look at here? Let's see if we can get some light on that foam. Okay. This foam here is for the bumper, mirror, and when I started working on the camera, this bumper was completely gone. The only thing left was some adhesive that held the old foam there, and so I replaced it. The mirror, when it comes down, hits the foam like so. You can see it pressing against it. The foam helps dampen the mirror when it comes up, but it also helps block any light from getting into the viewfinder, because the viewfinder is measuring your exposure, and you want to make sure that it's cut off and there's no light getting into the viewfinder once the exposure is set. And the screen was in good condition, which I was surprised. I didn't need to replace it. One bad thing about these FM and FEs is that the screen could not be dropped out from the front. It had to be, you had to get a camera repairman to go up and take the prism out to clean it. And that was okay if it would stay clean, but even if you had it clean, after a while some debris would get in there. Always in the wrong spot. It just bothers you. Right up here, you can see the prism had to come out for you to clean it. On the later models, on most cameras, they had a latch right here, and you could flip it and drop the screen out and clean it from the front, which was a vast improvement. Good for the customer and good for the repairman. And so people didn't have to send their cameras to the shop anymore to have the screen cleaned. Usually you want to use air. You don't want anything to touch the screen at all, no matter how dirty it is. I've seen many screens destroyed because people have tried to clean them, and you shouldn't. You use air or nothing. If it's that bad, you just need to order a new screen. You don't want to touch it. The mirror on this camera was in good condition, which I was surprised. Remember that, I say remember, you don't remember unless you saw the video, but the coating on the mirrors in these is on top, not on the back side, like in the mirrors you have in your home. And that's silver, and if you clean it, you can scratch it real easy. Some cameras have softer silver on their mirrors than others. Nikon's pretty bad about the silver being scratched. You got to be really careful. Just use cotton and some lens cleaner or glass cleaner and wipe it off. But basically you want to leave it alone. Okay, what else should we look at here? I told you we had a lot to cover on this camera, this mirror cage. This little brass disc here goes on the bottom of your speed control. And when you change your speed control, it rotates with your speed control, and it controls that little plastic disc there, which is inside the viewfinder. So when you set your camera for like 2/50th of a second, that little plastic disc will read 2/50th of a second inside the viewfinder. So you don't have to move your head from the viewfinder and look on the top of your camera to see what speed you're set at, which you had to do on the earlier cameras before they started putting speeds and f-stops inside the viewfinder where you could see them as you were changing them. As you can see here, just a cotton string connecting the two. Good system. It worked, but sometimes they get out of sync. In other words, you set the camera speed for 250, and maybe that little disc was reading 125 in the viewfinder, and the repairman had to adjust it. Not a big problem, but a problem. And here on the front, we've got a similar situation where if you will look right here, you see this gear, brass gear, and over here you have your follower that engages your lens. As you change the f-stop on your lens, it rotates that little brass gear. And that little brass gear is connected to a circular resistor disc with contacts which go up to the speed control. And counting on what speed you had your camera set at and what f-stop you had set here, the resistance a combining of the two would go to a wire that went across the top and down here to that green circuit board which I showed you earlier. Shaking here. And would estimate the correct exposure. So you could line up your diodes and make sure that the center diode was lit up and not the over-underexposure. So all your speed and f-stop settings were controlled right here with a circular resistor and a contacts. And it's a pretty simple system. I can't think of much more. I've probably talked enough about it. This is an excellent system for a camera. The reason being is that it's not failure prone. You don't have a lot of electronics, and everything is mechanical, and you're not dependent upon batteries. If the batteries did go dead, you can still take pictures. This camera, since it uses a few electronics, could last 100 years, 200 years on, as long as there were repairmen around to occasionally replace the foam and clean it up. And somebody 300 years from now could go to a camera show and have this camera, and it would be working fine. And that's the beauty of the FM, is the simplicity of it. I like the FM2 also, but this is an excellent camera. Okay, that's enough about the mirror cage. So the last thing we're going to look at here is the body. And the body doesn't have as many things on it to discuss as we did on the mirror cage. So maybe this part will be a little bit shorter. This is a modular design. You'll find it on the FE, the FE2, FM2, where the shutter is here. I say the shutter. The mechanism that controls the times are here. That is 1 second to 1,000. And in here are your shutter blades. There's 3 exposed here, but I think there's 5 in total. Some are hidden from the back. You've got the opening shutter and the closing shutter. The vertical shutter is more accurate than a horizontal shutter. And very good system. It would have been better if all cameras had these, but probably they were more expensive to make is the reason they weren't. The top up here, let's see, the top right here on this particular shutter, this wheel here goes up to the speed control on top of the camera. When you're changing the speeds on the top, you're turning this wheel. This wheel here has a string on it, which is turning this wheel. And this is the actual wheel that changes the shutter speeds. It has a series of cams in there that lock and interlock, and it's more complicated than I could ever make, but it does control the speeds of the shutter here. These two are one unit. And what else? It is mostly, if you'll see here, it's metal, brass, steel, maybe some aluminum, and one little plastic tab here that I can see. There may be others, but I complained on the on my video on the FE2 that there was too much plastic on that particular shutter. They replaced a lot of the metal parts with plastic, probably to reduce costs. But plastic is not a good idea. It's not a good idea to put plastic in a camera unless it's absolutely necessary. An all-metal camera like this one here could last easy a century, and maybe even 2 or 3 centuries if there were a repairman around to occasionally service it. But a plastic camera, I don't know how long they'll last, but the plastic is not a stable material. It will eventually get brittle or it'll get soft. I've seen that on many of the cameras that have been around the 40 or 50 years that I've been repairing cameras. And you have to replace plastic parts. And the trouble is they're not being made any longer. So you end up having to rob them from other cameras that maybe the camera wasn't exposed to much heat or as much cold, and the plastic part is still in good shape. But eventually all these cameras that have plastic parts The plastic parts will have to be replaced, or they're going to have to make new ones, which is unlikely. But there's enough cameras out there that I think any camera, whether it's metal or plastic, can be made to go a few centuries without many problems. I'm wondering if there's a camera show, say 200 or 300 years from now, somebody will be walking around with a Nikon FM, or a Canon FTB or a Spotmatic. I'm sure there will, but they'll be very unusual cameras and very expensive, I suppose. Okay, let's switch to the bottom here quickly. We've got the motor drive slot here on the advanced shaft. This setup here is much like the Nikon FE2 that I worked on a few weeks back. Oop, there's some plastic. This is a self-timer here. That's understandable. Self-timer is not that important. But yeah, a lot of plastic in that self-timer. Never noticed that. Here is your battery compartment. It is plastic. That plastic will eventually crack. It does in all cameras, not just Nikons. The batteries are pushed down in here against this contact, the lid's put on, and that means that you constantly got stress on the plastic. Month after month, hot and cold, and eventually it will crack and have to be replaced. I've replaced hundreds of these battery compartments, plastic ones, on various cameras. Over here you got the contacts for the motor drive. All in all, I'm very happy with the FM. I like this camera. I like the simplicity of it. Anyway, I need to wrap this up. Okay, that's the end of the tour of the FM. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a little bit. And let's call it quits. Okay, that's it. This 2-hour shoot turned out to be an all-dayer. I kept having problems while I was shooting my video, noises outside and things. Anyway, the FM is a very reliable camera, a very rugged camera. Of all the Nikons, maybe it's the toughest one. It will take a beating and keep on going. And if the meter quits, you can keep taking pictures. You may have to bracket your exposures a little bit to make sure that you get the picture, but you can keep going with it. I like the design inside, as I was pointing out as I went through it, the simplicity of it. There's no extra frills inside. It's just straight camera, mechanical, take the picture, go home. A lot of your electronic cameras, they look nice. If you look in some of my videos, you can see inside them. But if the battery goes dead, a lot of those go dead. And on some of them, even if they keep taking pictures, your exposure meter might go dead, or other features of the camera. The FM is just very rugged, and I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to take pictures with the film camera. And that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed the tour through the camera, and we'll see you later.